There's something to be said about the horror genre that has always had a special place in my heart. It brings out a feeling of emotion that so little games and other genres can really, let's say, tickle, for a lack of a better word. Maybe I'm weird, but the raw sensation of fear, adrenaline, and uneasiness is something that I absolutely adore in video game horror. But what exactly makes horror games stand out from the rest? Well, it's fear. Some games prefer to use it in a way that scares the ever-living daylight out of you. Others would prefer to administer your fight or flight response by having you tackle or avoid the monsters that would otherwise try to harm you. These type of games definitely hold their own, and it's great that we've gotten to experience a multitude of different horror games over the past couple of years. But then, there are the games where horror goes beyond our simple fight or flight response to survive. These are the games where it's not really about the shock value that is delivered, but the creeping and existential fear of what we don't know and psychological impact that they can have on us. A type of horror that's meant to make you ponder and question the fragility of one's well-being and existentiality. Enter Signalis, a game that is built entirely on this horror design. A game that is not necessarily hellbent on trying to scare you on a physical level, but one that is trying to scare you through your own psyche and existentiality. Although much of its core components borrow heavily from the predecessors that came before it, Signalis is a well-thought-out package that delivers an immaculate love letter to the survival horror genre. Coupled with a convoluted, psychological, and thought-provoking story, Signalis is sure to linger in your heart even after you've closed the game. In the distant future where spacefaring and exploration exists, you play as Elster, a stoic and combat-ready replica android who is assigned to a scouting vessel known as the Penrose. After awakening from a lengthy hibernation period through deep space, you try to get a handle for the ship's current status. However, you quickly surmise that things have gone terribly wrong. The ship has crashed on an isolated planet, and to make matters worse, your designated Gestalt partner, which is another term for human, has gone missing. You decide to venture out to find her in hopes that she is still alive and well. But as your journey begins, you realize that the realities of this world are not what they seem. Your dreams and nightmares start to intertwine, and you quickly start to question what is real and what isn't. You try to make sense of the things around you, but you're governed by a sole purpose, and that is to keep a promise that was made. An enigma wrapped in layers upon layers of psychological intrigue, Signalis will have you investigating and unraveling a complex story through Elster's journey. Along this adventure, you will come across different individuals and characters, each trying to survive in this hellish nightmare. Replicas of varying kinds will be found in different psychological and physical states, some being scared to death, while others are close to their demise. It is an effective approach, cementing the bleak and unforgiving setting, one that is normally seen in world-ending scenarios. The characters that do seem like they have their faculties still about them will have much more things to say with Elster. Who they are and why they are here make for an interesting story as you try to figure out where they fit in the larger puzzle. Various text logs and data entries are scattered throughout the environment, each revealing the true nature of the facilities surrounding you. You'll find documented reports written by ranked officers detailing events that happened prior to your arrival. Some will detail findings of how the world transpired, while others will reveal more sinister implications of what the facility was capable of. Cryptic notes will also be present, and they will leave your head scratching as you try to make sense of their esoteric meaning. Different posters and even replica manuals detail the intended purpose of your android brethren, revealing their original functions and even their psychological evaluation for how they should operate normally. This is especially effective when you start to realize that the monsters surrounding you were once your former replica brethren. For all the text logs that you can find, each of them are engrossing and satisfying to read, providing you with a deeper backstory to the people and its world. It does an amazing job of filling in the story elements that you would normally be able to find by simply going through the main game. You'll be piecing together information, finding common denominators, and trying to get some understanding of the world you are trapped in. The environments and locations do an amazing job of establishing the overall tone and setting of Signalis. Heavily Silent Hill and Lovecraftian inspired, the dilapidated hallways, corroded corridors, and bio-infested rooms make the world feel as bleak and nightmarish as possible. The industrial and otherworldly nature of certain areas still ground the game in its sci-fi setting, but also add to the surrealness of it all. You start to question whether you are in fact in the world that you crash-landed on, or simply a victim of your own mental decline. Every answer you try to find only reveals more questions about the bleak world you find yourself in, and the game is unapologetic with never giving you the full story. Often you will uncover small insights for you to piece together on your own. It is a world full of intrigue and mystery, and for those who are hungry, Signalis will whet your appetite as you try to unravel Elster's fragmented story and psyche. Elster's journey takes place from an isometric perspective. You'll be controlling her from a bird's eye point of view, helping navigate her way through each of the different areas, as well as helping her avoid or fend off the monsters that lie in wait. Alongside the core combat, you'll be required to perform the occasional puzzle element to progress the game forward. Borrowing almost exactly from classic Resident Evil games, Elster must traverse the world using a limited inventory space. A total of 6 slots is all she gets, and you'll have to carefully manage this since all of them are used for every single item in the game. You do also get a persistent storage system to help you manage your item collection. However, this does mean that you'll have to decide which items you want to keep and which ones you want to store. Hoarding too much can often lead you to not picking up any key progression items, and you'll have to backtrack to your storage container just to make space. Alternatively, you may also find yourself unable to pick up any combat and survival items, making your journey even more difficult. It's a love-hate mechanic in classic survival horror because of the constant need to prioritize what you have to pick up. But it is an important mechanic as it's meant to force the player to make life or death decisions as to what they should carry rather than what they want to carry. Without it, we'd be simply blasting our way through the game and it wouldn't even be a survival horror experience to begin with. Combat is fairly straightforward. Elster can equip a single weapon as well as an emergency tool, very similar to the one used in the first Resident Evil remake. Once equipped, you can take aim and start shooting at enemies. There's even a laser sight and a box indicator to tell you what you're aiming at. This is also really helpful since it indicates how much damage you can do. By standing still and aiming for a longer period of time, you can make your shots more precise and do significantly more damage, allowing you to drop enemies even faster. You can even do a shove attack should enemies get too close, as well as a ground stop to finish them off when they're down. But just because you put an enemy down doesn't mean that's the end of them. There's a chance for them to reanimate after a certain period of time, meaning that if and when you have to backtrack to certain areas of the map, you'll run the risk of possibly encountering them all over again. Until you get certain items that can put them down for good, you'll have to carefully manage how you want to spend your resources to dispatch them. Enemies in this game can hurt. Luckily, combat doesn't always have to be the primary option. Certain rooms will be wide enough that you can simply dodge them and make your way forward. Be careful though, as enemies can still cause damage the moment you walk into them. Unfortunately, you may not always have the option to run, as some corridors and hallways are just too tight for you to squeeze through. You'll either have to stand your ground, or force yourself to take hits in order to get past the enemies. In other instances, walking can actually be an effective option as well. Oftentimes when you enter a room, enemies will not be alerted to your presence. By walking behind the enemy vision, you can carefully sneak by them without getting noticed. Get too close to them, or the moment you break into a sprint within earshot, enemies in the room will flock straight to you without hesitation, so decide carefully on when and how you want to move. Overall, it's a fun system that allows for some varied gameplay by either avoiding or engaging combat. How you use the items you pick up will sometimes be the deciding factor with how you approach enemies. Have a lot of ammo? Maybe it's time to start blasting. Don't have any? Maybe it's time to start running. On top of combat, Elster will also encounter a wide variety of different puzzles. You'll be fetching a key item for a particular location, finding the necessary codes and information to unlock the pathway ahead, or the simple, but not so simple, means of finding the correct solution to a puzzle. Many of these are not entirely difficult, but others may require some clever thinking and puzzle solving. You'll even move to a first-person perspective to get a better look, providing some enhanced immersion as you interact with them. It's a nice touch, and can also heighten the sense of dread, especially when some of these puzzles are in rooms where you have to look around. One unique system that Signalis implements is a radio which you can tune to various transmission frequencies. You'll have to utilize it in order to uncover secret messages to unlock key items and in some cases, use it against certain enemies. It's a fun and interesting method of puzzle solving, and it also fits with some of Signalis' themes and recurring motifs that appear throughout the game. All in all, the puzzles are well implemented as the primary challenges needed to progress the game forward. They are also peppered in nicely to help break the constant cycle of combat and exploration. While Signalis borrows some of its thematic influences from other horror properties like Silent Hill and Lovecraft, it is still able to form its own identity through its presentation and setting. The pixelated graphics are very much akin to games of the first PlayStation and Nintendo 64 era, paying tribute to the first Resident Evil and Silent Hill games. It is impressive to find that the developer Rose Engine is able to utilize modern 3D assets with pixelated stretching and distortion to represent the older graphical generation. Not only does this establish the graphical tone of the game, but arguably enhances the setting as well. Enemies, for example, are meant to be disheveled versions of their former selves, and the pixelization only serves to further enhance their distorted nature, making them look more menacing and grotesque. Add on the fact that you also get the option for a CRT filter under the graphic settings means you'll get the complete retro experience. Signalis' visuals are further enhanced by the game's artwork and cutscenes taking inspirations from Japanese cyberpunk and sci-fi animation to surreal art house films. Character faces are vividly drawn and their bleak and cold expressions add to the game's thematic use of androids. Elster looks cool, stoic, and unflinching in her expressions, making her look like the most hardened individual capable of withstanding the horrors that lie in wait. The occasional smiles and pained expressions from other characters offer some humanity to them, providing us with a sense of emotional relief in this cold world. The game utilizes picturesque visuals for cutscenes, inserting movie-like still shots and text in brief succession in order to overload our eyes with a multitude of confounding visual information. Bright red visuals suddenly cutting to black, alongside large text in English, German, and even Japanese kanji, create a confusing sense of identity that only further adds to the game's mystery and intrigue. It is a visual spectacle and one that Signalis is never afraid to throw in your face to remind you of the waking nightmare that you are going through. On top of its visuals, Signalis presents you with a soundscape that is so hauntingly creepy, but also beautiful, tragic, and hopeless all at the same time. In one instance, all you hear is the stillness and metallic echoes of the corridor you're walking through. The next, you're overloaded with unpleasant, upbeat industrial sounds as you fight the creatures that would try to harm you. And when you suddenly find Elster walking through a hellish landscape, only the melancholy play of a piano will be there to keep her company. Signalis knows when to pick and choose its soundtrack to elevate the mood, and the same goes for the sound effects. Accessing your menu, item usage, and puzzle interactions all sound very tactile and punchy. Using the radio also adds a sense of industrial grunginess when accessing different frequencies. You'll even hear the beeps of Morse code as you listen in for puzzle clues. Monsters sound distinct, with their audible shrills letting you know that they're hunting for you or you've put your boot to their face. More sound variety in the common monsters would have been welcome, but the audible shrills do an important job of letting you know that they mean business. The sound design of Signalis is exceptional and arguably one of the game's most important aspects, highlighting the dreadfulness and atmosphere of the world. It's definitely the tone setter for many portions of the game alongside its superb visual presentation. What is essentially a love letter to the elements of classic survival horror, Signalis is able to utilize them to create a new and enjoyable experience. It's a reminder that, even when horror games try to evolve into new and different directions, the old system still has a part to play. But beyond that, Signalis sets itself apart from the rest of the pack by putting its horror-themed heart on its sleeve. It's hard to find a more recent survival horror game that's so engrossing and atmospheric, alongside a convoluted yet intriguing story. Elster's journey may be one that looks bleak and hopeless, but it is a journey that is worth seeing to the end. A mystery where you'll be scratching at the surface to find answers, Signalis will have you think about every scene, character, theme, and setting to make sense of the whole story. It's an amazing horror game, and one that I still find myself thinking about even months after the game was released. Sure, the game itself may not be as long as some big-budget horror titles, roughly 5 to 8 hours on your first run-through, but even so, the moments that are present in this game have a much bigger impact than even some expensive titles. For a $20 price tag at the time of this video, I'd pay that $20 again if I could, just so I could relive the experience. Signalis is a gem, and is absolutely worth your time if you have any remote interest. Thank you guys for watching, and if any of you guys are fans of Signalis or even other horror games in general, feel free to let me know. I'm always happy to hear from you guys.